and welcome back to my channel. So today I thought I would do a video kind of letting you guys know what I have been reading lately because I have been absent for a good while, which you guys obviously know. And I have been reading a lot for class because I am an English major at my college, but I haven't been reading a lot for pleasure, which is something that needs to change, and I think getting back into my YouTube channel will definitely help that. But I just wanted to talk about some of the books that I've been reading in my classes because I've really been enjoying them. I'm in a lot of really interesting classes, so I figure I might as well tell you guys what I've been reading. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first book that I have been reading and that I'm currently reading for one of my classes is kind of about Gothic fiction and literature, and that book is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I have already read this book. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a really, really cool book to kind of delve into and kind of get the real story of the Frankenstein tale. And something that I was always taught, like when I was younger reading this, is that Frankenstein is not the monster. Frankenstein is Victor Frankenstein, the guy who creates the monster. So you just call the monster, which always confused me because I was like, why is everyone calling it the monster when you grow up with it being called Frankenstein? You know what I mean? I don't know. It got confused somewhere along the lines, but this book is so good. I really, really enjoy it, and I've been reading this for my Gothic literature class, like I said, and it's really cool to kind of get into the Gothic ideas of this book and how they kind of play into that. So if you don't know, Frankenstein is about Victor Frankenstein, who is a guy who wants to kind of cure illnesses and kind of fix the world, basically, and so he thinks that if he can create life from death, then there's a sure way he can cure illnesses and like diseases and all of that. So he creates a monster, and this monster honestly terrifies him, and so he like kind of abandons it, and it's kind of about the story of how the monster kind of becomes more human and learns to speak and think like a human. And you kind of have to think about the idea of if Frankenstein's monster is actually a human, if you would like call him a human, or if he's just a plain monster, and kind of how you kind of draw the line of a person and a monster and what makes them a monster and all of that. And that's what we've been talking about in my class, and I've really been enjoying that because the first time I read this I didn't really consider those things, but really what is a monster and how do we create monsters and what makes him a monster compared to other things and other people and all of that. But yeah, I don't want to tell you too much because obviously it's not a very long book. It looks long, but it's not. And I think that you should definitely read it for yourself. But yeah, I've been reading this and I've been really enjoying it, so I thought I would mention that. So another one that I read for my Gothic literature class is Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto, which is the first time I've ever read this book, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was such a ridiculous book, but such an interesting one at that. This also is the first kind of representation of Gothic literature that was ever created. And this book follows a like wealthy family, like a royal family, and one day something tragic happens and it kind of sparks this idea of Gothic like elements, and some like mystical, magical things start happening, and it is so ridiculous. The things that happen in this, we know that like wouldn't happen really, but it gives you kind of like this really cool, like, I don't know, really interesting story that things come to life and there are spirits and different things like that. And it's kind of about the family behind it and how they deal with all of these elements emerging from their castle. And yeah, I really think it is an awesome book. I never thought that this was the first one to develop like the idea of Gothic literature, and it definitely kind of pursued my interest for loving Gothic literature and looking into that and seeing the different elements that come into it. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say about it. I am so out of practice, I don't know what I'm saying. But this was awesome. It's a very quick book. You can get through it very quickly, and the characters in this book are also really interesting to analyze because a lot of them are very different, and you can see how all of them kind of push the story forward and obviously highlight the ideas that come along with Gothic literature, like horror and terror, and all of that. So this is a really cool one, and I'm glad I got to read this. So my next class is a class about fiction, and it is about like ethnic fiction. So I've been reading a lot of really cool books for that. So the first book that I read was No No Boy by John Okada, which honestly has to be one of my favorite books of all time now. I obviously never heard of this, and when we started reading it, I could just tell it was a really poignant and interesting piece. It's about this boy who, sorry, there's a man walking by. It's about this boy who is living in Seattle, Washington, and he is of Japanese heritage, and he is asked to fight in World War II, and there is a questionnaire that comes along when you're asked to fight, and you answer the questions, and two of the questions kind of go along the lines of, are you willing to like forfeit your allegiance to like Japan or wherever your native country is, and are you willing to fight for the US completely and do all of that? And he says no to both of those, and if you say no, they put you in prison. So he goes to prison for, I don't remember how many years. He goes for 4 years to a prison, like concentration camp kind of thing, because he has obviously said no to fighting for the US, and that's obviously not okay in this time period. So put them him in prison, and then he is let out, and it's basically about him trying to discover himself after coming from prison, and like the repercussions of saying no to those questions. And he goes through a lot of different events with his family and with his friends, and he kind of tries to find answers for who he is and what his meaning of life is. And I just thought it was a really interesting story because I thought it was really good because you get to see his struggle with him coming to terms with his culture and being a Japanese American, and how that has affected him and his family, and how the people in his life obviously have different views about their culture and how you represent it and all of that. And I thought it was just a really, really good book, and I thought it left on a really interesting note, and I really wanted more, and then it ended, and so I was sad. But this book was really cool because it was not popular when it first came out, and then it became a hit, but John Okada had already died when it became popular, so hopefully he's very proud of this book because it is one of the most talked about ones in like ethnic literature classes. So I absolutely love this. I think it's definitely an important book to read. I'm not Japanese, I'm full American, but to see something like this and the struggles that people have with their identity was really, really interesting. So I loved this one a lot. The next book I have is The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz, and this book is about a Dominican boy, and he is just very nerdy and very quirky and just honestly wants to find love, and he just has such a big heart, and he struggles to find any of that because he's kind of outcast. He's I think he's overweight, and he's not socially very great at like talking to people, so he just wants somebody to love, and it's really hard for him to find that. And it also goes over the ideas and the different things that a dictator in the Dominican Republic, Trujillo, did, and all the things that came along with his reign. And there is something that comes along with Trujillo's reign that people in the Dominican Republic believed to be fuku, which was kind of a curse that he kind of put on them, and if it was put on you, you would be cursed for the rest of your life, and your life would just not be good. It would be evil, and like bad things would happen to you. So Oscar believes that there is fuku in his family. They go through the different events of his grandparents and his parents and his sister and his friend, and it goes through all of those different things, and them as people, like what has come to be, and how they've had a very hard life because of what he believes is fuku. And it's just such a good book. I think it's so interesting to get so many different perspectives, which you really do in this book. You get to see a lot of different characters and how they deal with certain things, and how they all come together as a family, and I just love it. I think it is definitely very interesting because I have never read anything about the Dominican Republic or Trujillo at all. Like, I just thought it was a really cool thing to read about. So if you're interested in something like this, definitely check it out. It is a sad book. it's sad because he just wants love so bad, and it's hard for him to find it, and he just needs that like reassurance from somebody. And yeah, so I'm not going to tell you anymore, but I hope you guys pick this up because I really enjoyed it. I never would have thought to pick it up before, but I'm really glad that I was to read it for my class. And for my last reading class, I have a American heroine kind of feminist literature class where it talks about strong women and big important protagonist women in books throughout the years, and it goes back very far. And so I read 3 books in this class so far, and I have really found them very interesting so far. So the first book that I read was Charlotte Temple by Susanna Rowson, and this book is very interesting because it's about a girl, and she is kind of corrupted into a lot of different things because she's very naive and doesn't really know much. And so she goes through this life of corruption, and all these different events keep going and going and going until, you know, it's very hard for her to get out of the sticky situation that she's in. And there's a lot of representations of like corruptive men and also corruptive women. And I just think it was a very interesting read because it's so short, but so much of her life, it's like all of her life in this book, and you get to see how different things that have happened to her have affected her in the later years. And she's 15 or 14, very, very young. And the fact that a lot of these things happened to her because she was naive and young is very sad. But I thought it was a good book. I struggled to get through it because there are a lot of characters and you have to keep track of like who is who and all of that. This book is very interesting because it definitely fits into the category of a sentimental novel, which were novels that were written to kind of give the readers a warning and kind of let them know about different things that could happen to them. And so this book definitely kind of represents that idea of warning young girls how they can be corrupted and the different things that can happen to them if they follow Charlotte Temple's life. So it is definitely kind of a warning kind of book, but I thought it was very interesting. And although it's not completely realistic for everybody, for sure, especially in this time period, it definitely could apply. So I thought it was a very interesting book, and I'm glad that I got to read that one. The next book that I read for this class was The Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs. And this book is about, this is an actual slave narrative, so it is actually a true story, and it is written by Harriet Jacobs, who was a slave, and this is her life story. She just changed up the names and different characters just so that it wouldn't, you know, lead back to her when she initially published it. She eventually changed it to show that it was written by her. But this book is, like I said, a slave narrative where it talks about her life being a slave and the different interactions she had with her slave owners and different people and how her life goes. And I just thought it was very, very powerful because she was a very strong woman who did a lot of different things for her children and for herself and her family, and she really tried her best to get through this, and she eventually did. But again, this is a very heavy topic, and I thought it was very interesting because I have read slave narratives before, but nothing this personal, so I thought it was a very interesting read. And if you're interested in something like this, definitely pick it up. I thought it was very, very interesting, and it would definitely give you some insight on how it was to be a slave during this time in the South. So yeah, this is another really interesting one. It's very quick too. All of these books are very quick, but definitely leave a lasting impression. So that is the end of this video. I know it's kind of random and it's a bunch of school books, but I know a lot of people like classics and a lot of people like books that aren't conventionally young adult or young adult fantasy and all of that. So this is kind of a different video, but I hope you guys enjoyed and you guys are excited for more videos. I'm gonna try and get up a video at least once a week. Hopefully I can do that. I know it's been a couple weeks since I uploaded my I'm back video, but it's been a lot. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys want to leave me a comment of what you've been reading lately and what you recommend, I would love that. And I will talk to you guys in my next video.